I'm Charlie Bright of Gold Derby, and today I'm speaking with Jin Ahn, the art animation supervisor and supervising director of the Amazon Prime series, The Legend of Vox Machina, as part of our Meet the Experts TV animation panel. First question I wanted to ask you is, so this whole thing was based on, came from Dungeons and Dragons and a Dungeons and Dragons campaign. Were you a fan of Dungeons and Dragons prior to working on the series?
Ironically, no, I never got a chance to play Dungeons and Dragons, and it wasn't until I got to, collaborate with the people from Critical Role that they introduced me to this whole world of tabletop gaming that I was unaware of.
So actually, could you explain, talk about this group, Critical Role, how they came to be, and how their ideas ended up becoming an animated series?
Yeah, so getting to know them, I learned about their past and origin stories. So they're essentially boiled down just a group of friends who decided to play Dungeons and Dragons together for decades. Then, throughout their journey, they've all become successful like voice actors and creators in their own right. And then Davis actually have a established like company and a big Twitch presence and content presence on YouTube, and create a true brand for themselves tied to their Dungeons and Dragon passion. So it wasn't until that their fan base and community became so huge that they were driven to come to Titmouse Animation Studio, where I was when I first met them, and instantly, I really got their true intention and passion. Like they made me feel like I was invited to like their circle of friends, and they feel very comfortable. And they weren't passing a judgment of like, oh, I've never played Dungeons. They're very welcoming and warming with that, and really got me invested into their characters as well.
I've always found D&D players to be very welcoming in my experience as well. So it's nice to know that goes across the spectrum there.
Yeah.
We had the second season of the show come out earlier this year. What would you say is the biggest difference in the approach to this material in season 2 as opposed to what was done in the first season?
Yeah, I would say season 2 was definitely when we felt like we actually understood the show we wanted to make. Season 1 was about shooting for the stars and setting goals for ourselves and try to hit and reach those goals. And then by season 2, even though we were met with new creative challenges like dragons and more dragons, at that point we were well versed in our like creative language and our pipeline process and how we handled each character, and really got to know each character's personality down to the point where we knew like the poses and gestures that they would do during certain scenarios and such. So yeah, season 2 in a nutshell, like was when we truly understood the show we're making, which then gave us the bandwidth to continually push the vision that we wanted to go for.
And was there any difficulty in trying for Critical Role in trying to come up with in trying to craft the story for season 2, or did it all just sort of come naturally to them?
Yeah, I mean, like I think one of the unique scenarios about this show and working with Critical Role is this entire story is based off their actual Dungeons and Dragons game that they played together like many years ago. And obviously they have to take creative decision choices to translate it into an animated series format, because like that campaign lasted for hours and hours and hours, and we got cuts down, right? So but that's why I really appreciate working with the Critical Role team, because they were like bring the initial like script base and initial story that they want to go for, and then once we start going in and start making the episodes, they allowed me a lot of creative freedom to pitch them ideas like, oh, like I understand like this has to happen, which leads to this, but what if like to that connective tissue, like we kind of construe it in this angle and kind of push it visual like this. So they're very receptive and collaborative in that sense. I really appreciate working with them, because it's not always a simple translation from, let alone an idea from your head to animation, to even like a Dungeons and Dragons game to animation. So it was a fun process in its own way.
So one thing I'm always very curious about is Were there any challenges you faced with nailing down the designs of the characters?
Actually, luckily, it wasn't too much of a strewn up process. We got a super talented, well-established designer, Phil Barassa, who set the look and tone of the characters, and his initial pass already landed us like 80% in the radius. And at that point, like initially in his first pass, the Critical Role team was super ecstatic just to see the characters come to life from such a well-seasoned veteran hand. And after that, it was just kind of like, oh, like, let's play with the option for Vex's like feather pauldron, like how long should Vex's cape be? So it was like tweaks after that. So the process itself was actually pretty smooth in that sense.
Was it the same with the settings? Because the settings for it are so incredibly designed and meticulous. Did you have, was it a similar setup with that?
Yeah, ironically, we were so fortunate too, because that would be our art director, Arthur Loftus, who was already a huge fan of Critical Role even before jumping onto the project. So we had the advantage of our art director knew this campaign, these characters, this world's inside and out. So
He probably already had something in his head as to what that probably looked like.
exactly. So when it came time to actually conceptualizing, designing locations, he would pitch his ideas, show his concepts, and myself included in the Critical Role team, we were just blown away. We're like, just yeah, this is it. Yeah, keep doing it, man. Like, so yeah, Arthur really nailed, and I think he really fulfilled his vision from being such a huge fan of this campaign.
And with regard to the people from Critical Role that are actually the writers and the voice actors for these characters, do they record all together, or are they individual?
We actually started the show pre-pandemic, so in the beginning we're doing ensemble records, we're all together, and I got to be in the room with them, and that was a huge wonderful experience in itself. And then of course the pandemic hit, and ever since then they have been recording separately, but they have such a strong and long relationship with each other, like they're practically friends and family. Like if we need something on the fly or have last second line changes, they just hit each other up, and within hours or less we will get new pickups and records instantaneously. So it's a really huge advantage that they're so talented, but they also are such a tight-knit family.
And has there been any aspect of how audiences have responded to this show that has caught you off guard in any way?
And I would say what caught me off guard is like we knew like generally this would resonate well with the fans, and we're always curious about how it'll do to like new people. So the comments that I read through or the feedback I get is like always from like the people who are like, oh wow, I didn't know anything about the show. I jumped right in and instantly just fell into the world, hooked on the characters in the world. And we're always trying to, that was one of the big things we're trying to like balance well when we're making the show, is we want to be faithful to the fans, but also make something that's like something that could be an easier barrier to entry or more alluring for general audience who aren't aware of the characters. Kind of like myself, like I learned this character thing so while I was kind of working on it and truly fell in love with them, and I want to kind of pass on that experience to like the general audience.
Well, Sung, thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to having you joining our panel in just a little bit.
Thank you.